Captain Marcus Chen had seen many things in his 15 years of deep space salvage operations, but nothing quite like this. The distress signal had led his crew to what appeared to be a derelict mining vessel drifting in the outer rim of the Kepler system. The ship's hull bore scorch marks and signs of weapon fire, but what caught his attention were the strange energy readings coming from the cargo hold. "Life signs detected, Captain," reported Sarah Kim, his science officer. "Multiple forms, but the readings are unusual, not human, that's for certain." Marcus nodded grimly. Pirates had been increasingly active in this sector, and finding survivors of their attacks was becoming more common. His ship, the Meridian, was equipped for rescue operations, though they usually dealt with stranded miners or researchers, not alien survivors. The boarding operation went smoothly. Marcus led a small team through the damaged airlock, emergency lights casting eerie shadows along the corridors. The ship's atmosphere was thin but breathable, though it carried an acrid smell of burnt electronics and something else he couldn't identify. They found the cargo hold sealed behind a heavy blast door. When they finally cut through, Marcus was not prepared for what lay beyond. The hold had been converted into a makeshift prison, with dozens of small, crystalline beings huddled together in crude cages. Each creature stood roughly 3 feet tall, their translucent skin shimmering with internal light patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their breathing. "My God," whispered Tors, his security chief, "they're just children." The beings looked up at the humans with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected fear and hope in equal measure. They communicated through a series of harmonic tones that rose and fell like a musical language. Marcus had his universal translator, but it was struggling with the complex harmonics. "Sarah, can you make sense of their language?" Marcus asked. Kim worked frantically with her equipment. "I'm getting fragments. They're saying something about home, and there's a repeated phrase that might mean mother or queen. They seem to be asking for help." Marcus didn't need a translator to understand the desperation in their alien eyes. These beings, whatever they were, had been captured and caged like animals. The human captain felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same rage he felt whenever he encountered the aftermath of pirate raids on human colonies. "Tors, start cutting these cages open. Carefully," Marcus ordered. "Sarah, set up a medical station in Bay 2. I want each of these beings checked for injuries." As they worked to free the aliens, Marcus noticed something peculiar. Despite their obvious fear, the beings seemed to recognize something in the humans' actions. Their harmonic songs grew less frantic and more melodic, almost grateful. When the first cage opened, the small crystalline being inside stepped out cautiously, then approached Marcus directly. The creature reached out with a delicate, 6-fingered hand and touched Marcus's arm. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. He saw vast crystal cities beneath purple skies, beings like these ones living in harmony, and then darkness, violence, ships coming from the stars to tear families apart. The vision was so vivid that Marcus staggered backward. "Captain, are you all right?" Sarah asked, steadying him. "They're telepathic," Marcus realized, looking down at the small being who had shared the vision. "They showed me what happened to them, pirates, but not the usual kind. This was organized, systematic. They were specifically hunting these people." Over the next several hours, Marcus's crew worked tirelessly to free all 43 aliens from their cages. The ship's medical bay became a temporary refugee center as they treated minor injuries and provided what comfort they could. The beings were remarkably resilient, but it was clear they had been traumatized by their experience. Through patient work with the universal translator, Sarah began to piece together their story. They called themselves the Veilthir, and they came from a world called Kristhara in a distant sector. The pirates who had captured them weren't random raiders, but members of what seemed to be a galactic slave trade network that specifically targeted their species. Why would anyone want to enslave them? Tors wondered aloud as he watched the Veilthir children creating small light patterns with their hands, perhaps a form of play or communication. Marcus had been wondering the same thing. The Veilthir seemed peaceful, almost fragile, though their telepathic abilities were remarkable. As he observed them, he noticed something else. Despite being children, they carried themselves with an odd dignity, a bearing that seemed almost regal. "Captain," Sarah called from her station, "I'm picking up long-range communications. The signals are using the same harmonic patterns as our passengers. I think someone's looking for them." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and concern. Finding these beings' people was the right thing to do, but something about the situation felt larger and more complex than a simple rescue operation. The organized nature of their capture, their unusual bearing, and now these communication signals all suggested that his crew had stumbled into something much bigger than they realized. The Veilthir children had been aboard the Meridian for 3 days when the first ships appeared on the long-range sensors. Marcus stood on the bridge, watching the display as 12 massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Their design was unlike anything in his database, elegant curves of what appeared to be living crystal, each ship easily 10 times the size of his salvage vessel. "They're hailing us," reported Communications Officer Park. "The signal is coming through on multiple frequencies, and they're using both the Veilthir harmonic language and standard Galactic common." Marcus straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put them through." The main screen flickered, revealing a being that was clearly related to the children they had rescued, but larger and more imposing. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her crystalline form pulsed with deep purple and gold light patterns. Her multifaceted eyes held an intelligence that seemed to peer directly into Marcus's soul. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "I am Empress Veilthira, ruler of the Crysthara Dominion. You have something that belongs to me, humans." The translator rendered her words in perfect Galactic common, but there was something in her tone that made every human on the bridge feel both small and significant at the same time. Marcus had dealt with alien dignitaries before, but this was different. This being radiated authority in a way that transcended species. "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, falling back on diplomatic protocols. "I am Captain Marcus Chen of the salvage vessel Meridian. We rescued 43 Veilthir from what appeared to be a slave transport. They were in distress, and we provided aid as required by galactic law." The Empress's light patterns shifted, and for a moment her imposing presence seemed to waver. "My children, are they unharmed?" Children, the word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not just any Veilthir children, but the Empress's own offspring. His crew had rescued the royal family of an entire alien civilization without knowing it. The implications were staggering. "They are safe and unharmed," Marcus assured her quickly. "My crew has been caring for them. They've been through an ordeal, but they're strong." "Permission to come aboard," the Empress said, though it sounded more like a polite order than a request. Marcus found himself nodding before he fully realized it. "Granted, Bay 3 can accommodate a shuttle of reasonable size." Within the hour, a smaller crystal ship had docked with the Meridian. The Empress arrived with a minimal escort, though the 2 beings who accompanied her were clearly elite guards, their crystalline forms darker and more angular than the royal family. Marcus met them at the airlock with what he hoped was appropriate ceremony. Up close, Empress Veilthira was even more impressive. Her presence seemed to fill the corridor, and Marcus could feel a subtle telepathic pressure at the edges of his mind, not intrusive, but a clear indication of her mental capabilities. She moved with fluid grace toward the medical bay where her children were housed. The reunion was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. The moment the Empress entered the room, all 43 young Veilthir began to glow in synchronized patterns, their harmonic songs rising in what could only be described as joy. The Empress knelt among them, and for a few minutes, the entire group seemed to communicate in rapid flashes of light and complex melodies. When the Empress finally stood and turned back to Marcus, her bearing had changed subtly. The formal authority was still there, but now it was tempered with something else: gratitude and perhaps surprise. "Captain Chen," she said, her harmonic voice softer now, "you have returned the most precious things in my empire to me. Tell me, what do you know of galactic politics?" Marcus glanced at his crew members, who were watching the exchange with fascination. "Enough to know that I probably just stumbled into something much bigger than a routine rescue operation." The Empress's light patterns shifted in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Indeed. My children were taken during a diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim. It was meant to be a cultural exchange, a way to introduce the younger generation to other species and build relationships for the future. Instead, they were captured by a criminal organization called the Hegemony." "The Hegemony?" Sarah stepped forward. "Captain, I've heard that name in intelligence reports. They're not just pirates, they're a shadow organization that trades in rare sentience, high-value targets for collectors and private armies." Empress Veilthira nodded grimly. The Kristara Dominion has been fighting them for decades. They specifically target our people because of our telepathic abilities and our longevity. A single adult Veilthir can live for thousands of years and serve as a living computer or strategic advisor. Children like mine, she gestured toward her offspring. They are even more valuable because they can be trained and molded. Marcus felt sick. They were going to sell royal children into slavery. They likely had no idea of their true identity, the Empress said. But yes, the hegemony has been growing bolder, striking deeper into civilized space. Your species has not encountered them yet because humanity is still relatively new to the galactic community. They prefer to avoid drawing the attention of developing military powers. What can we do to help? The question came out of Marcus's mouth before he could stop himself. His crew looked at him in surprise, but he realized he meant it completely. The Empress studied him for a long moment, her multifaceted eyes seeming to look right through him. You would offer to fight the hegemony? You barely know us. I know enough, Marcus replied firmly. I know they steal children and sell them into slavery. I know they hurt your people, and I know that my species has a particular problem with bullies. Tors stepped up beside his captain. The captain speaks for all of us, Your Majesty. We've seen what the hegemony does. If you're fighting them, humanity will stand with you. The Empress's light patterns shifted through several colors Marcus couldn't identify, and her harmonic song took on new notes. Around the room, her children began to glow more brightly, their own songs joining hers in what sounded like celebration. Captain Marcus Chen, she said finally, I think this rescue may have changed more than just the fate of my children. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself standing in the crystal halls of the Kristara Imperial Palace, feeling completely out of place among the ethereal beauty of Veilthir architecture. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with gentle light that responded to the presence and emotions of those walking through the corridors. He had been summoned to a formal audience with the Empress and her High Council. The throne room was a marvel of organic engineering, vast crystal formations that had been grown rather than carved, creating a space that felt both majestic and natural. The Empress sat upon a living throne that shifted colors in harmony with her own bioluminescent patterns. Around her, 12 council members formed a semicircle, their ancient forms glowing with the deep wisdom of centuries. Captain Chen, the Empress spoke, her voice carrying easily through the crystalline acoustics of the chamber. The High Council has reviewed your proposal. They are skeptical. Marcus had expected this. When he had offered humanity's assistance in fighting the hegemony, he had known it would sound presumptuous. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, with relatively primitive technology compared to species like the Veilthir who had been spacefaring for millennia. I understand their concerns, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, maintaining his composure despite the intimidating presence of the ancient beings around him. Humanity is young and relatively inexperienced in galactic warfare. Councillor T.H. Varus, the eldest of the assembly, stepped forward. His crystalline form was so old it had taken on a diamond-like transparency, and his voice carried harmonics that spoke of eons of experience. Young human, the Kristara Dominion has been fighting the hegemony for longer than your species has existed. We have advantages you cannot imagine: telepathy, technology that grows and adapts, lifespans that allow for strategic thinking across centuries. What could your people possibly offer? Marcus had been preparing for this question since the moment he made his offer. Councillor T.H. Varus, with respect, we offer exactly what you don't have: unpredictability. The council members' light patterns shifted in surprise. The Empress leaned forward slightly, her multifaceted eyes focusing intently on Marcus. Explain, she commanded. The hegemony has been fighting you for centuries, Marcus continued. They know how you think, how you plan, how you wage war. Your advantages have become predictable to them. They know you value life and will hesitate to sacrifice your people. They know you prefer elegant, minimal solutions. They've adapted to fight against your strengths. He gestured to himself and the small human delegation that had accompanied him. Humans think differently. We're chaotic, unpredictable, and we have a documented history of winning wars we shouldn't have been able to win. We're also new enough to galactic politics that the hegemony won't see us coming. Councillor Astral, a middle-aged Veilthir with silver-blue patterns, spoke up. Even if this unpredictability has value, your technology is centuries behind ours. Your ships are slow, your weapons are crude, your defensive systems are barely adequate for local space. True, Marcus acknowledged. But you're thinking like a Veilthier. You're thinking about fighting them with superior technology in set-piece battles. What if we don't fight them the way they expect? Sarah Kim stepped forward from the human delegation. Your Majesty, Captain Chen is referring to human concepts of asymmetric warfare. Throughout our history, humans have specialized in fighting larger, more advanced opponents by refusing to fight on their terms. The Empress's patterns had shifted to deep-thought colors. Continue. Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing hegemony supply lines that Veilthier intelligence had provided. The hegemony operates like a business because that's what they are. They have supply chains, communication networks, financial systems. They need to move their captured sentience from collection points to markets. They need to maintain their ships, pay their crews, coordinate their operations. He highlighted several key points on the map. The Veilthier approach has been to fight their military forces directly, trying to free captives during transport or attack their ships. This makes sense because you want to minimize casualties and act with honor. But humans, Marcus grinned grimly. Humans would attack their infrastructure, make their operations unprofitable, turn their own business model against them. The chamber fell silent, except for the subtle harmonic conversations passing between the council members at frequencies beyond human hearing. Finally, Councillor T.H. Varys spoke again. You would target non-combatants, innocent traders who happen to do business with the hegemony. No, Marcus said firmly. But we would target their laundering operations, their black market shipyards, their safe harbors. We would make it expensive and dangerous to support them. We would turn their business partners against them by making association with the hegemony a liability. Sarah added, we would also use disinformation, economic warfare, and what humans call special operations. Small teams doing maximum damage to key targets. The Empress stood, her towering form casting prismatic light across the chamber. Show us. We will provide you with intelligence on a small hegemony operation, a processing facility where they prepare captured sentience for sale. Demonstrate these human tactics. Marcus felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with terror. This was his chance to prove that humanity deserved a place in the galactic community. But it was also a chance to fail spectacularly in front of beings who could live long enough to remember his mistakes for millennia. We'll need a small fleet, Marcus said. Nothing fancy, but ships that can't be traced back to the Crysthara Dominion, and we'll need volunteers who understand they might not come back. You will have whatever you require, the Empress declared. But Captain Chen, understand this. If you fail, if your people prove to be merely another group of warlike primitives who cause more harm than good, the Crysthara Dominion will distance itself from humanity permanently. Marcus nodded solemnly, and if we succeed. The Empress's light patterns shifted to colors Marcus had never seen before, and her harmonic voice took on notes that seemed to resonate in his very bones. If you succeed, Captain Chen, humanity will have earned something no species has achieved in over 2,000 years, a true alliance with the Crysthara Dominion. As Marcus left the throne room, he realized that the rescue of 43 alien children had somehow evolved into a test that would determine humanity's future among the stars. The hegemony processing facility hung in the void like a mechanical spider, its 8 arms extending into space to dock the various ships that brought their horrific cargo. Marcus watched it through the viewscreen of the modified freighter he now commanded, studying the patterns of movement around the station. For 2 days, his mixed human and Veilthier intelligence team had observed the facility, learning its routines. 12 ships docked currently, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, who had volunteered for the mission. 6 are processing vessels bringing in new captives. 4 are transport ships preparing to move processed slaves to market. 2 appear to be guard vessels. Marcus nodded, his attention focused on the tactical display. The past month had been a whirlwind of preparation. The Crysthara had provided his team with 3 modified freighters that appeared to be ordinary merchant vessels, but concealed advanced weapons and shielding. More importantly, they had provided something Marcus considered even more valuable: volunteers. 30 young Veilthier had insisted on joining the mission, despite their parents' objections and the High Council's concerns. They were all children of noble families, including several of the royal children Marcus had originally rescued. Their leader was Prince Kithara, the Empress's eldest son, whose crystalline form had taken on the deeper hues of approaching adulthood. The human approach requires that we think like the enemy, Cathara had explained to the mixed crew during their briefing. Father taught us that understanding your opponent is the first step to defeating them. The hegemony thinks only of profit and efficiency. We will use this against them. Now, as they prepared to execute their plan, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just about destroying a hegemony facility. It was about proving that human tactical thinking could work in the galactic arena, and about establishing trust between two very different species. Phase 1, execute, Marcus ordered. The first part of their plan relied on something the hegemony wouldn't expect: misdirection on a galactic scale. 3 months earlier, Veilthir intelligence had leaked false information through their spy networks about a major crystal shipment moving through a distant sector. The hegemony had taken the bait, redirecting 2/3 of their mobile forces to intercept what they believed would be a massive payday. Simultaneously, the Veilthir had begun what appeared to be a major military buildup near their core worlds, complete with fleet movements and communication traffic that suggested an imminent assault on a known hegemony stronghold. This had drawn most of the remaining forces away from routine operations like the processing facility. Their security is minimal, observed Tors, who had also volunteered for the mission. 4 guard ships and station defenses. They're not expecting trouble. Phase 2 began with psychological warfare. The human team had spent weeks creating false identities and inserting themselves into hegemony communication networks. Now, they began spreading rumors through the criminal underground, stories about a new player in the slave trade, someone offering higher prices and better security than the hegemony. Their profit margins are already thin, explained Dr. Yash Tanaka, the team's economist who had become an expert in criminal finance over the past month. If their suppliers start thinking there's a better option, some of them will hesitate to deliver their cargo. The rumors were working. Marcus could see it in the station's communication patterns. 3 of the inbound processing ships had developed technical difficulties and were requesting extended docking time. In reality, their captains were probably negotiating with the supposed new buyer. Phase 3 was where things got dangerous. Marcus and his team launched their assault not on the station itself, but on its support infrastructure. The processing facility depended on a network of supply ships, maintenance drones, and communication relays spread throughout the system. "Strike Team Alpha, you're clear for the maintenance depot," Marcus commanded. Sarah's team, operating from one of the modified freighters, moved in on an automated facility that serviced the hegemony's ships. Instead of destroying it outright, they uploaded a virus created by human and Veilthir programmers working together. The virus would gradually degrade ship systems over several months, making hegemony operations increasingly unreliable without pointing to any obvious cause. Meanwhile, Prince Cathara led a team to the system's communication hub. The young Veilthir had proven remarkably adept at human-style improvisation, combining his people's natural telepathic abilities with human tactical thinking in ways that surprised everyone. "Communications hub neutralized," Cathara reported, "but not destroyed. The virus Lieutenant Kim developed will give us access to their entire communication network for the next 6 months." The beauty of the human approach was that the hegemony wouldn't immediately realize they were under attack. The degrading ship systems would initially look like normal mechanical failures. The compromised communication network would appear to be functioning normally while actually feeding intelligence to the Allies. The psychological warfare would seem like natural market forces. Phase 4 was the only part that involved direct confrontation, and it was precisely targeted. Marcus's team moved in on the processing facility itself, but their goal wasn't to destroy it, it was to steal it. "Remember," Marcus addressed his assault team, "we want those ships intact. Every vessel we can turn represents dozens or hundreds of captives we can rescue instead of the hegemony selling them." The battle was brief and decisive. The hegemony guards were prepared to defend against the kind of frontal assault the Veilthir typically employed, not the coordinated, multi-vector attack the human Veilthir team executed. More importantly, they weren't prepared for the psychological impact of facing enemies who had clearly studied their tactics and turned their own procedures against them. Within 4 hours, the processing facility was under Allied control. More significantly, they had captured the station's entire database of operations, financial records, and contact information. The intelligence coup was staggering. "Captain," Sarah reported from the station's command center, "we found the records of over 3,000 captives currently in hegemony hands, including location data for 12 major facilities." Marcus looked around at the mixed human and Veilthir crew members working together to process the intelligence windfall. The young Veilthir nobles were adapting to human tactical flexibility with remarkable speed, while his human crew members were learning to incorporate telepathic coordination into their operations. "Phase 5, he announced. "We clean out their accounts." Dr. Tanaka had identified the financial institutions the hegemony used to launder their profits. While the team had been capturing the processing facility, she had been working with Veilthir financial experts to execute coordinated attacks on 17 different bank accounts across 6 systems. "It's beautiful," Tanaka reported. "We've frozen 60% of their liquid assets and transferred another 30% to accounts controlled by anti-slavery organizations. They're not just losing this facility, they're losing the capital they need to operate." As Marcus surveyed the captured facility and the freed captives they had discovered in its holding cells, he realized that something fundamental had changed. The traditional Veilthir approach of honorable, direct confrontation had been valuable but limited. Human tactical flexibility had added new dimensions to their capabilities. But more than that, the cooperation between the two species had created something neither could have achieved alone. The Veilthir provided technological superiority and strategic patience. Humans provided unpredictability and tactical innovation. Together, they had just dealt the hegemony a blow that would reverberate throughout the criminal underworld. "Your Majesty," Marcus spoke into his communication array, knowing the Empress would be monitoring the mission. "Phase 5 complete. Target secured, intelligence acquired, and 47 captives freed. Request permission to proceed to secondary objectives." The response came through harmonics that needed no translation, pure joy and approval from the Empress and her High Council. But it was Prince Kithara who put it into words as he approached Marcus in the station's command center. "Captain," the young Veilthir said, his patterns glowing with excitement, "I think we have just changed the balance of power in this part of the galaxy." 6 months after the processing facility raid, Marcus stood once again in the crystal throne room of the Kithara Imperial Palace. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood representatives of 12 human worlds, 4 alien species that had been liberated from hegemony slavery, and Prince Kithara, who had become something unprecedented in Veilthir culture, a war hero who had learned to fight like a human. The hegemony was finished, not destroyed in some climactic battle, but systematically dismantled through the kind of comprehensive campaign that combined Veilthir patience with human ingenuity. The intelligence captured from that first facility had led to 17 more raids. Each success had provided new information, new targets, and new opportunities to turn the criminal organization's own structure against itself. The final hegemony stronghold surrendered yesterday, Empress Veilthira announced to the assembled delegates. Their leadership has been captured, their financial networks dismantled, and their remaining assets have been distributed to reparations funds for their victims. Marcus smiled as he watched the reaction around the room. The liberated species were celebrating in their own ways, harmonic songs from the Veilthir, bioluminescent displays from the Aquatic Consortium, and rhythmic drumming from the Terran delegation. But it was the expression on the Empress's face that meant the most to him. The ancient ruler had changed over the past months. Her formal dignity remained, but it was now tempered with something that looked remarkably like friendship. The rescue of her children had begun as a simple act of human decency, but it had evolved into something that had reshaped galactic politics. "Captain Chen," the Empress continued, "the High Council has asked me to make a formal announcement." Marcus straightened, uncertain what to expect. The success of their joint operations had already exceeded his wildest dreams. Humanity had gone from being an unknown species on the galactic fringe to being recognized as a legitimate military power. More importantly, they had earned something money couldn't buy: respect. "The Kithara Dominion hereby extends an offer of formal alliance to the Human Federation," the Empress declared. "Not as senior and junior partners, but as equals in a mutual defense pact that will serve both our peoples for generations to come." The throne room erupted in celebration, but Marcus found himself thinking back to that moment 6 months ago when he had made the split-second decision to rescue what he thought were just alien refugees. If someone had told him then that his choice would lead to humanity becoming a major galactic power, he would have laughed. Prince Kithara approached him after the formal ceremony concluded. The young Vaelthir had grown during their campaigns together, not just in age but in understanding. His crystalline form now showed the deeper hues of full adulthood, and his light patterns carried the complex harmonics of someone who had learned to think in multiple strategic dimensions. "My friend," Kithara said, using the human term they had developed between their species, "I have been asked to head the new Joint Tactical Division. We need a human counterpart, someone who understands both species and can help train the next generation of officers." Marcus considered the offer. His days as a simple salvage captain seemed like a lifetime ago. "What makes you think I'm qualified for something like that?" "Because," Kithara replied, his patterns shifting to the colors Marcus had learned indicated deep sincerity. "You taught us that the most important tactical advantage isn't technology or telepathy or ancient wisdom. It's the ability to see a situation differently than your enemy expects." Sarah Kim joined them, wearing the uniform of the new human Vaelthir cooperative fleet. "Captain, I hate to interrupt, but we're getting reports from the Outer Rim. A new threat has emerged, something calling itself the Iron Hegemony. They're using former hegemony technology, but with a different approach. Military conquest rather than economic exploitation." Marcus looked at his old friend, then at Prince Kithara, and felt a familiar sensation. That moment of recognition when a simple situation reveals itself to be far more complex and important than it first appeared. The pattern of his life seemed to be rescuing someone in distress and discovering that it connected to something much larger. "Well," he said finally, "I suppose someone needs to figure out how to fight these new enemies, and humans do have experience dealing with military conquest." "Indeed we do," Sarah agreed, "but this time we won't be fighting alone." The Empress approached their small group, her towering form radiating the kind of satisfaction that came from decisions proved correct by time and experience. "Captain Chen, I wanted to thank you personally before you departed for your new assignment." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "I should be thanking you. 6 months ago I was a salvage captain. Today I'm apparently an admiral in an interstellar navy." "6 months ago," the Empress corrected gently, "you were a man who saw children in distress and chose to help them without knowing who they were or what it might cost you. Today, you are still that man. The rank and title are simply recognition of something you always were." She paused, her light patterns shifting through a spectrum of colors that Marcus had learned indicated deep emotion. "You know, in all the centuries my people have been part of the galactic community, no other species has surprised us the way humanity has. Most civilizations become more predictable as we learn about them. Humans seem to become more interesting." As Marcus prepared to leave for his new posting, he reflected on the strange chain of events that had brought him to this point. A random distress signal had led to rescuing alien children, which had led to discovering a galactic slave trade, which had led to an alliance that was already reshaping the balance of power in their region of space. But perhaps most importantly, it had led to something else. Proof that the universe was full of beings worth protecting, and that sometimes the best way to defend your own people was to stand up for someone else's children. The Iron Hegemony would learn what their predecessors had discovered the hard way. Humans had a particular talent for turning impossible situations to their advantage, especially when they had friends to fight alongside. And now humanity had friends among the stars, friends who remembered that when it mattered most, humans had chosen to help. As his new ship departed the crystal world of Krysthara, Marcus watched through the viewscreen as Vaelthir vessels joined his fleet. The rescue mission that had changed his life was over, but the alliance that had grown from it was just beginning. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, new challenges waited. Marcus smiled. After 6 months of working alongside the Vaelthir, he had learned to think like they did, in terms of centuries rather than years. This alliance would outlast his lifetime, probably outlast his species' first age among the stars. But it had started with a simple human choice to help children who needed protection. That, he thought, was something worth fighting for,